topic for today is the three personality theories that I think everyone should know. So, this is for people that want to gain more insight on themselves, on others, and just become overall more intuitive from a personality and psychology perspective. So, noting that these theories are maybe not the most evidence based necessarily or the most famous theories, just the ones that are going to be the most helpful for you in your life, in my opinion. Starting off with birth order theory. So, this suggests that a child's position in the family, being firstborn, middle, youngest, etc., heavily influences their personality traits. So, for example, firstborns are sort of known to be more responsible and a leader, while the youngest is more like social, creative, more free-spirited, and then the middle children being kind of wild child, more black sheep, kind of rebellious. So those are sort of like the personas that are sort of associated with those. But I will say scientific evidence is limited with obviously genetics, parenting style, and the environment, so many different rules at play. But I would say, anecdotally, at least in my family and many of the other people and friends and family that I know, I think it's actually super accurate. Obviously, sometimes people do stray from those personas, but I think that they are incredibly accurate, at least for part of the person's personality. So I challenge you to think about yourself, your family, other people in your life. Does it ring true for you? Personally, I am a massive believer in this theory, and it's literally one of the first things that I ask when I meet people. I ask, do you have siblings, and like, where are you in the birth order? Moving on to the psychoanalytic perspective. So, in this theory, it emphasizes the role of the unconscious mind and early childhood experiences in shaping your personality. It is often debated in contemporary science, but still I'm sure most people have heard of Freud. It is still very popular in pop culture and in other topics. So, it basically involves id, ego, and superego. And basically, Freud proposed that these three components work together to create complex behaviors. So the id is more like instinctual and primitive. The superego is more like internalized moral values, like what you deem sort of like the utmost kind of highest perfect moral behavior. And then the ego acts as a mediator between them, and is sort of balancing the wants of the superego and the wants of id. By the way, no idea why it's called id. Please, someone let me know. It's so strange. I had to look up how to say it. And so this theory suggests that behavior is often driven by inner conflicts and desires outside of conscious awareness. So, super interesting. I'm not like as gung ho about this one as birth order theory, but super fascinating. Moving on to the third one, I know I've heard the Petersons, like Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson, talk about this one a lot. This is the Big Five model. So, this is the most scientifically supported and widely used model in modern psychology. The central idea is that personality can be boiled down to a set of stable internal characteristics or traits, largely influenced by our genetics. The most prominent framework within this theory is the five factor model. Okay, so caveat, this is the trait theory, and the Big Five model is falling underneath therein. So just pointing that out. And so essentially, O, C, E, A, and N: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. This model provides a common language for describing how individuals differ and is relatively stable over a person's lifetime. So I think it's really interesting to sort of reflect on where you fall within them. Of course, there are many like tests online, so totally recommend doing those if you're into that. But I also think like you can sort of eyeball it a little bit and just do some internal reflection on where you fall. There are also really interesting studies that you can look up online that sort of list what is more typical for male and female. So it is very, like there are sort of ballpark ranges that are more typical for men and then more typical for women. Of course, that doesn't mean that that's always the case. There are women that will score more like men and men that score more like women. So super interesting. I totally recommend you look more into it. I think that it honestly helps you become more insightful and understand yourself better and to become more empathetic to others.